whether you're a DC or Marvel fan, but in any case, let's go back and remember the movie, The Avengers: Infinity War. In the movie, Thanos, the bad guy, snaps his fingers while wearing the Infinity Gauntlet, which is a magical metal globe bedazzled with 6 almighty stones, and half of the Earth population is wiped out. Now imagine that you are one of the survivors after the blip, but you are not a superhero. You need to re-establish an entire global system. What would you do? Where would you start?
We must start with understanding the global system. In recognition of the multidimensional nature of global governance, we have to cover international relations, public policies, political theory, political economy, and sociology. Employing a multidisciplinary and a multi-level perspective is paramount. For example, my PhD research was on internal conflicts in Russia and Turkey, specifically focusing on the role of state militias. I have also followed institutional trajectories and regimes of Turkey and Russia, conducting a comparative analysis of democratic backsliding and populism in both countries. Studying internal conflict and institutional restructuration has been at the intersection of comparative and international politics. This requires an understanding both at the domestic and international level.
To re-establish a global system, we have to start with understanding globalization. And today, it is almost impossible to understand globalization without understanding capitalism. Thus, as I study the pathologies of capitalist development over the long durée, my research interests focus on political modernization, sustainable development, critical food studies, and agrarian transformation. Regardless of how powerful their agriculture has been in the past, food security is weaker in countries where conflicts and neoliberal agricultural policies coincide. High input prices and liberalized market conditions negatively affect food accessibility. The production is also fragile because of high prices of inputs and the cost of waste, transportation, and storage. Particularly in a country like Turkey, where small-scale producers dominate agricultural structures, all these inevitably transform food accessibility into a structural problem. A structural problem which must be addressed on all levels, from local to global.
In studying international relations and globalization, we offer a critical understanding of what global governance means and how it works, both in theory and practice. Where do we start? First, we cover the historical context of the emergence of global governance and survey a range of theoretical perspectives, both mainstream and alternative ways of thinking about the world order. Second, we focus on the myriad ways in which international institutions and other formal organizational structures govern state practices. Third, we reflect on how increasing interdependency between states and their people poses complex governance dilemmas for the public, private, and non-profit sectors at the global, national, and subnational levels in many global issue areas like climate change, security, health, financial crisis, trade, sustainable development, and poverty reduction. Finally, we focus on the relationship between institutional capacity and sustainable development governance at local and global levels.
Studying international relations and globalization requires a multidisciplinary perspective. As a political sociologist who studies the interaction between large-scale social transformations and subjectivities, I have been particularly interested in how globalization affects the way people relate to each other and how they understand and shape their political identities and belonging. Currently, I'm working on projects involving protest repression, autocratization, as well as micro-foundations of responses to repression. International norms and networks affect how regimes respond to and deal with domestic challenges, and how they legitimize themselves. In the contemporary world, all regimes attempt to claim a kind of democratic legitimacy. And thus, a key challenge for autocratic regimes is this question of how to systematically undermine the scope of freedoms contestation and accountability in order to expand and maintain power, while also preserving democratic appearances. Thus, I study what kind of tools autocratizing regimes deploy to govern this challenge.
How do we study the issues that we study? For example, I work on how social media and emerging technologies affect international and sub-state rivalries. I focus on quantitative and digital methods, including social data science, machine learning, and agent-based models. I'm currently running 3 international research projects on computational modeling of civil wars and the strategic use of social media in conflict settings. As of 2022, about 60% of the world population is connected to social media, and nearly 85% of them regularly post on a daily basis. The volume and depth of human and social behavioral data online presents us with a historically unprecedented pool of information about societies, nations, and key individuals. By deploying rapidly emerging techniques from computer science, physics, and statistics, I work on harvesting real-time digital human footprint and try to provide new insights on international conflict and rivalry using text mining, network analysis, and geospatial methods.
I study international relations with a focus on peace and conflict studies. My current research is on the intersection between regionalism, managerial coordination as a form of interstate governance, and how this affects the steps to war. I have an interest in the quantitative study of international relations history, major power politics, and the emergence of international regimes that foster peace or conflict. I studied conflict dynamics in the global and regional international political systems from a historical perspective. For example, in a multi-method exploration of why some decision makers fail to avoid war when public mobilization as a bargaining tool fails, I posit that the flexibility of the decision makers of the weak actors is influenced by their ability to overhaul their winning coalition.
I'm a comparativist who works on social group representation and leadership in varying political institutions around the world. My studies focus on the relationship between size, social group characteristics, and institutional factors in producing better representation. I'm currently working on projects about the relationship between descriptive and substantive representation and the effects of electoral systems. In answering how we study international relations and globalization, we aim to give students the tools to conceptualize their ideas in terms of research questions and design, data collection, and empirical analysis. In doing so, we focus on the issues and problems related to theory development and analytical frameworks. We surveyed different strategies of qualitative and quantitative analysis and research ethics.
I study political behavior and political communication. My research interests are populism, nativism, democratization, civil-military relations, politics of nostalgia, and migrants and minorities in Turkey. My current research is on migration policies of political parties in Turkey, determinants of populist attitudes, and measuring migration aspirations of refugees. Let me illustrate how we study our topics of interest. As you all know, the rise of populist parties around the world raises concerns about liberal democracy. Amid the discussions on democratic backsliding, to scrutinize populism in Turkey, I used the method of quantitative content analysis. For this goal, I used parliamentary group speeches of political leaders between 2011 and 2019, a large study of more than 500 cases as raw data. My results illustrated how some leaders are significantly more populist than others.
As a political scientist and part-time anthropologist, I take seriously the notion that international relations are social relations, realized and produced by people, and that to focus on such relations requires attention to the spaces where those relations take place. I study security as a lived process, emerging in cities where the local, the intimate, and the global confront, reproduce, and transform each other. I conduct the study ethnographically, through the lived experience of urban inhabitants, who interact, interpret, understand, adapt, and consent to mundane and extraordinary practices understood as security to make sense of the world they live in through their experience. I juxtapose my ethnographic study against a discourse analysis of laws that are understood to facilitate various processes of security.
If we go back to our question in the beginning, Thanos's means and solutions were wrong, but he was right about one thing. There are many problems in the world where all these political, economic, environmental, and healthcare problems emerging on a global scale call for new approaches that require multi-level thinking for problem solving in all areas of public life by building local, national, and global connections. In our study of international relations and globalization, we first try to understand the issue from different perspectives, come up with an analysis, and propose solutions based on evidence.